For our next talk, we have a cool and valuable topic. I think that a lot of us are familiar with the term of legacy apps, and it often sounds like a bad thing. Oh, I'm supporting legacy. But legacy is a good term. It is a term that describes software that is serving people. It is valuable stuff. And we have to operate that software and take it into the next generation of platforms. So today, joining us is Brandon Blinko and Matthew Campo from VMware to talk about leveraging standard build packs to migrate not so standard apps potentially to new places, right? Take it away, Brandon and Matthew.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're having a good time at Spring One so far. We're really looking forward to hanging out for the next hour, talking about how we could leverage standard build packs for not so standard applications. So here's our quick legal disclaimer we have to throw on to our slides. And we also have an abstract here. This comes from the site. This is more for folks who wander across these slides or the video later on. But who are we? I'm Matt Campbell. I'm a solutions architect with VMware's modernization group. I do a lot of interesting stuff working with customers who have to wrestle with applications like the one we're going to talk about today. And Brandon Blinko is also on my team in a program manager role that helps sort of wrestle with choosing the right work and the right actions at the right time for those customers. Just a real quick whirlwind tour of where we're going to go, and then we'll just get right into it. We wanted to start by just talking a little bit about why build packs now, why talk about this right now. Build packs aren't new, Cloud Foundry is not super new, but we wanted to sort of anchor the scenario that we're going to talk through in a real life challenge that we all sort of see with our customers and maybe you all are seeing today with your companies. The meat of our talk, maybe 40, 45 minutes, we're going to spend together. We're going to walk through a live example. We're going to ping pong back and forth, working through our replatforming journal here. And we're going to try and push an app that doesn't quite fit, and we're going to see what we can do about it. And then we'll wrap up with just talking a little bit about when would you use this particular maneuver, these tools, the things that we did for the last hour. Put them in your toolbox, but when do you break them out? When do you not do these things? And just sort of frame the solution at the end. And then we'd love to chat with you more at the Q&A session. There'll be a separate Zoom link that's posted in the Slack channel. You should be able to get to the Slack channel from the session page. So feel free to jump in there, drop questions in, or prep your questions ahead of time. And we'd be happy to chat a little bit more with you in person on that side. Brandon?
Thanks, Matt. And once again, I want to second welcome to our talk. Both Matt and I are excited to be giving this talk today. We think it's really timely. We're finding a lot of our clients are at this point what we'll be discussing in their app modernization journey. But the real reason driving this conversation that we want to have with you today is that many of us are finding ourselves with really valuable software, but we're not really sure how to. Maybe it's a certain language that doesn't seem to fit for the cloud. Maybe it's a legacy stack, and we're just not sure. How do we leverage these platforms that exist now for the cloud that help us to observe, to provide self-healing, to provide horizontal scaling? How do we leverage that tech in a meaningful way for some of these more challenging and legacy applications? So what we're going to talk about here is really what we consider the last 100 yards. You've done some of the easy stuff. You've gotten some quick wins, moving applications to the cloud. You might have done some of the big scary stuff. So you've taken a big monolithic application, you started to refactor it, pull it into the cloud as microservices. But what about some of this weird stuff? These applications that drive business value, but aren't immediately candidates for moving to the cloud. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. Before we do that, we'd like to quickly talk about one of the tools we're going to heavily discuss here, and that's Buildpacks. Buildpacks, to us, they improve your dev velocity. They provide a consistent deployment mechanism. They improve your security posture, and ultimately, these build packs that we're going to talk about have a growing community of support. So in our talk, we'll be focused on standard build packs out that have community support behind them. We'll be demoing today on Cloud Foundry, but build packs aren't just for Cloud Foundry. We chose to do that for this talk specifically. And if you're interested in learning more about build packs that aren't necessarily focused on Cloud Foundry, you can check out Cloud Native Build Packs at buildpacks.io.
Cool. Can we get into it? I'm so excited.
Let's do it. Oh, all right. So we are going to be re-platforming today a fork of the Slashdot code base that is written in Perl. And it's a circa 2000s, about mid 2000s application. So we're looking at about a 15-year-old app. This is not uncommon for the work that Matt and I do. We work with customers that have had apps that are 25 years old, in some cases 30 years old. They bring business value, but in this case, for this particular application, the production environment, it's a virtual machine, it's an Apache web server, and like I said, it's a Pro web app. And we'll be taking a step-by-step approach. We'll pair through this exercise of replatforming this application. The target for this, as I said before, will be Cloud Foundry. We're really looking to get some of the operational benefits of a platform as a service out of this. And we really don't feel like we can afford to commit to a rewrite today. So Matt, should we get started?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so glad we found this specific code base to think through, because, this feels like maybe we don't all have a Perl code base we want to push today, but there are lots of folks that have the this strange system that they inherited, or that has been sort of grown over time, that's valuable, and we just don't really know exactly what to do with it. There's not really a lot of obvious answers. So here we go. So the first thing we want to do is just take a look at the environment the application lives in today. So if we just take a look at this production VM, like you mentioned, Brandon, I think we've got this one VM, it's running Ubuntu, and the application itself is sort of split into these two slices. We have the environment on one hand that holds things like Apache's web server, the Perl, the mod Perl that's all wired together to run this thing. And then we have this install section, which sort of provides our news platform, and then our aptx.wtf site-specific configuration and content. So we think that the application that we need to migrate lives over here in the install. That's where we're going to start. So the thing we're going to do, we're going to just grab that latest build from our build system, or maybe we grab it from the actual production VM if this is an old enough app that it doesn't have a CI pipeline or something. And we're just going to take a look real quick. And we have that install directory, all of the things, all of the bits that we would expect. We're going to take a quick look and make sure that we're logged into Cloud Foundry, and we are, because we want to really quickly just explore what options we have in terms of the build packs provided by the platform. Cloud Foundry is really interesting because it sort of vendors a specific set of build packs inside the platform itself. If you're targeting things with Cloud Native Build Packs, you can sort of explore your options in the registry with the pack tool or with buildpacks.io. But right now we're just sort of looking around to see what options we have.
So can we just push it?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Sometimes it works, sometimes, usually it doesn't, but it's a very cheap way for us to get that first drip feed of feedback. So do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so it looks like we got a failure on this one, and it looks like Cloud Foundry that was invoking the detect scripts on the build pack, and we weren't actually able to find something for this particular application.
And we expected that, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing knows what to do with this giant pile of stuff that we got off of a virtual machine. So
right. So maybe we can take a look and see if we can find something that maybe a custom build pack that's out there. Let's go to GitHub and we'll take a look.
Sure.
There's a few here, but I see this one, CF Buildpack Pearl, might be promising, also very old,
Yeah.
but let's just give it a shot. Let's just take it. Let's run with it. Let's see what happens.
And this sort of assumes that we're able to use custom build packs in the foundation, right, Brandon?
That's correct. And for this case, we can, but oftentimes at our clients, we don't actually have the luxury to be able to use a custom build pack. In this case, it failed, as to be expected. And we're at a point where we can make a decision to either go down this rabbit hole of using a custom build pack, customizing a circa 2016 build pack, and essentially inheriting that and maintaining it moving forward. But for the sake of this conversation, we actually we want to move on and not move forward with this custom build pack.
Yeah, I mean, I think like our goal here is really just to test the water, right? If something works out of the box, then that's great. It takes a lot of the work off of our hands, but we don't want to get into the business of having to go down the rabbit hole of updating and changing and supporting a build pack that's out there. That leaves us to like our first big question, this big fork in the road. We want to know, is there an opinionated build pack that builds the environment that we need? If we remember when we looked at the VM, we need that Apache, we need Perl, we need mod Perl, things like that to be able to run our application bits. So it might be worth like pausing and sort of wondering, what do we mean when we say an opinionated build pack? And if you sort of think about your application in this sort of layer cake, at the top, you have your application bits. These are the things that are really specific to your app. Underneath that, you have this platform. This is, in our case, it's this rehash news platform. It might be WordPress. It might be something that is basically serving up your application or giving you some reusable functionality. Underneath that, we have the server, like Apache, or the language runtimes like PHP or Perl or Java, JVM. And then under that, again, we have operating system bits and dependencies. And so an opinionated build pack, the most opinionated build pack would be take my application bits and I'll give you all of the other stuff. I'll take care of all that business for you. And so this might be, maybe you're pushing your WordPress site with a WordPress like build pack that manages making sure that you have the most up-to-date WordPress and configures plugins and does all the different things. More likely, you're looking at something like this, which is something akin to the PHP build pack, where it's going to give you a standard operating system. It's going to set up your Apache server and your PHP in an opinionated way, but it's going to let you push whatever the heck you want on top of that. And if we go to less opinionated, this is something more like the binary build pack, that it's going to give you the operating system dependencies. It's going to give you that standard golden image, that stem cell, but it's not really going to have an opinion about what's going to run on top of it. It's going to leave that to you, so it's going to be on you to do more. And then, of course, we could just not use build packs. We could build it all by hand. We could be on call forever. So I think what we'd like to do is try using the PHP build pack. We did a little digging around at the build pack list earlier. And when we looked at those, the documentation around those build packs, we can see that the PHP build pack gives us an option to deploy Apache or Nginx. And we were looking for something that gives us an Apache environment, but also gives us enough knobs and dials to sort of convince it to behave the way our production environment is. So let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. We're going to switch to the manifest here, just so that it's easier for us to push. We're going to define our build pack. We're going to push it, and it starts, which is not what I would have expected because we're not pushing a PHP app. So I don't know. Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's try opening our app in the browser, and we see Perl, but not the Perl that I expected, not the Perl that I want.
Yeah, at this point, it looks like we're just serving up our Perl source code. So yeah. I think the thing we need to ask ourselves is, how do we customize this PHP build pack? And the first thing we should probably do is go to the docs, and we'll take a look and see what's available to us. Cool. So Matt and I took a look, and we found there was this options file, which had a few promising things that we could override. And from there, we went to the GitHub page for the PHP build pack. and took a look at what default values were provided. And so we decided, well, you know what, we may need to customize some of this. So looking through the docs, having an understanding of how we do that, we started to create our own custom configuration. And if we revisit our production VM, we're actually running a version of HTTPD, which is 2.2. What comes baked right now with the current PHP Buildpack is 2.4. So let's just set our version from our production version and see what happens. So let's do another CF push. And it looks like we failed. And we failed because we're not actually able to go and fetch that dependency, this 2.2 that we're specifying, which is okay, but we need to do a little bit more research. So let's head back over to the docs and let's try and understand how we might be able to customize this PHP Buildpack further. And it looks like there's a folder structure that we can bring our own configuration to override what the Buildpack provides. So this is different from the options file. So maybe we go over to the GitHub project again, and we see that these files exist here. Let's just pull them down as is. Let's copy them in and let's take a look at one of the files. So in this case, let's look at the Apache server configuration. They've already gone through and done some of the work for us, so we don't have to do this when we pull in our production server configuration. So they're listening to the port, pulling in the environment variable, which is all good. So why don't we take a look and see out of the box? Let's look at some of the HTTPD modules and see if, as Matt mentioned earlier, we're looking for mod Perl. We want to make sure we can load Perl. And when we looked through this, we weren't really seeing what we expected, but that's okay. We're still going to give it a shot. We'll see if we can push it as is with these files added. And it looks like by getting rid of our HTTPD version, pulling in these configuration files, we start. But are we successful? So let's do one more thing here.
That, right, Brandon? Because we didn't really change anything. We're just bringing in these configuration files so that we have something to start modifying from here. So
that's a great point. At this point, we have the plumbing ready for us to start to tune and configure based off of what we have in our production VM. So let's actually start to add something that comes from our production VM. And in this case, let's make 2 explicit calls to modules we need that we know our application needs. And let's see if push.
Yeah, no luck.
Oof. Okay. So let's go take a look at the logs and we'll see what's going on. And it looks like, quickly scanning these logs, it looks like these modules that we want to load aren't actually available to us. So at this point, we need to ask ourselves another question.
Yeah, I think it was worth exploring. It's interesting that the PHP Buildpack comes with some modules enabled by default and some modules disabled, but able to be uncommented to turn them on. And the fact that we didn't see mod Perl in there at all, and that we're getting this problem, tells us that it's not even the Buildpack is not even providing those shared modules, which makes a lot of sense because it's not a Perl Buildpack, right?
Yeah.
But that brings us to really asking ourselves where this application depends on its current environment. And so this could mean lots of different things. It could mean an application. In our case, depending on an operating system dependency that might have gotten installed on that VM. It might mean, hey, there's a pile of shared configuration that many applications on this production environment depend on. So there's things over here in Etsy, my awesome app that everything loads. It could be like shared libraries, things that it loads between different applications. So lots of different ways an application that we rip out of its original environment and try and push into this new environment. A lot of ways that it could depend on the environment. For us specifically, we're just really interested, where does mod Perl come from? Right, and mod Perl here, it's usually either installed through the operating system package manager or maybe compiled from source for this specific machine or environment. And I think I want to sort of explore the operating system dependency aspect a little bit here. And we're going to do that with a tool called app-cf packager. It's written by a colleague of ours, Brad Starkenberg. This is a really clever sort of hack built on top of a couple of different build packs, actually. It's out there in GitHub, so you can use this. But the purpose of this is to basically run the apt build pack, which allows you to install something like an operating system dependency specifically targeted for the environment that we know this build pack is going to give us. In our case, on Cloud Foundry, it's CF Linux FS3 here, the stack. But we get to install the things that we need, and then it basically it packages those things up and it hosts them so that you can download them using the static file build pack. And this is really great for us because it means we can get access to something we know should run in our resulting environment from the build pack. And we can vendor that closer to our application. We don't have to depend on the fact that the application environment has this thing installed. We can stick it in the stuff that we're pushing and go from there. So I'm just going to go ahead and try it out. We're going to clone the repo. We're going to set these two packages, the mod Perl and the mod APRec. These are the two modules that we were trying to load earlier that are missing. I'm going to push the app. And once it's started, I'm going to go to the route to open it in my browser. I'm going to click this link to download the files. And oh my goodness, I don't know what we just downloaded. I think what we're actually looking at is like a layer of the operating system file system structure that those apt-get install whatever's resulted in. And so the things we're really interested in are this first section, the Apache 2 modules, which holds all of those shared objects that we want to configure in our Apache. And then we have this stack of supporting Perl modules that allows Perl and Apache to communicate back and forth. So this is cool. And I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to grab that. I'm going to stick it into my development environment here, my install directory that I've been pushing. And I'm going to call it CF Linux or lib CF Linux FS3, just to differentiate it in case I have to vendor different stacks. If we're going to eventually target a different stack and I want to come back and say, well, why, what was this set of mod Perl things targeting? Just makes it a little easier for us. Let's go ahead and configure our web server's configuration now. Instead of configuring and loading these modules in a relative way, I'm going to be really explicit. I'm going to load them from the directory that I know I'm pushing up with the build pack. And so this home environment variable on Cloud Foundry, it refers to home vcap app, which is the location that this application bits all show up as. So great. I'm really hoping that if we make this change and we push this lib CF Linux FS3 up with the rest of our app, it crashed. Okay, it did not work the way I expect. So I'm going to go check the logs. And it looks to me like it is looking for those files where I expect in home vcap app lib CF Linux FS3, but it's saying it doesn't find those files. So something is not quite what I expect here.
Yeah. So at this point, Matt and I went back. We cleaned up the we got a running container. So we did a little bit of work to get this running so we could SSH into it. And so Matt, why don't we go and explore the directory structure of what's actually getting pushed. And so if we take a look at the what's at the root here of the home directory. Okay, so I see an app directory. This looks good. If we go into the app directory, what do we actually see? Okay, so this is interesting. So if we remember back when we were showing what the production environment looked like and what we would expect to see here, this doesn't look right. I'm curious if the files that we pushed up are actually getting pushed in a location we didn't expect. So let's take a look inside of htdocs. And here, these files are what we would have expected at app/. So we have to maybe go back to the docs and see if there's some way we can control this build pack. And so doing that, we found there's a option to specify the webdir, the root directory in which we're serving these files. So why don't we go back to using our options JSON file and see if we can override that default to our what we expect to be under app. So let's specify that.
Push it.
Let's push it. Let's see what happens. And it looks like it started up. And if we were to SSH back into that container, we now see what we would expect. So that's all good. So let's go navigate to the site and let's see what happens. All right, so it looks like the Perl status that we had set up to give us an indication if Perl's actually enabled. We're getting an internal server error. Let's go look at the logs. Maybe we can get some sort of feel for what's actually going on under the hood. And it looks like there's a Perl module, this Apache 2 status Perl module. It looks like we're not able to locate that. So that's interesting. I'm not sure. What do you think, Matt? Where do you think we should go from here?
Yeah, I think it reminds me of something we saw earlier, right? Where we convinced Apache to load those vendored modules, but we haven't really told Apache about any of those supporting Perl libraries, right? And so I'm seeing here, it's providing this output that at INC, it's sort of telling us, here's all the places I'm looking for this module, and I don't see our lib CF Linux FS2 here, or FS3, right? So that gives me a little hint that maybe we have to come back and do a little bit more configuration to get Apache to start looking in those places. And so we can do that with this startup Perl script. We're going to stick this in our application repository as well. All that's doing is sort of listing out the additional paths that we want to look at, right? We're going to come into our web server configuration, and we're going to use Perl require, this line in the middle, to run that script. And so really what we're doing is we're augmenting the list of things that the server's scanning, and we're hoping that it will find all of those other things that we're pushing with our application. So let's go ahead and push it and see what happens. And it actually looks like it's running, which is great. And we can verify, oh, you know what? If we test the Perl status now, we're actually getting that working. So what we've successfully done is vendored Perl stuff and convinced the PHP Buildpack to run Perl the way we'd expect. I think we have an environment that might be able to run our application at this point.
Yeah, it might be. Maybe at this point, Matt, we can start to pull in some of our application-specific configurations. So
Yeah.
why don't we actually do that? Let's go back to our Apache configuration, and let's just include our / configuration, and we'll see what happens. So why don't we? It's cheap enough for us to do another CF push. Let's do a CF push, and we'll see what happens. And it looks like that was not successful. We didn't expect it to go so easily. So let's go take a look, and let's see what's actually going on under the hood. All right. So if we look at this, I see lib CF Linux FS3, which is great. But it looks like we're actually missing some of our app-specific modules now.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, Matt, we might need to go back to our production VM and take a look at how how this is running on that VM. So do you want to take us back and see what we're actually pushing?
Yeah, let's take a look around. So just recall that, we looked at our production VM and we found this install directory, which had all our application specific bits. That's what we've been pushing up to this point. But it's not finding application code now. It's missing some of those application modules. So unfortunately, the app itself has sort of bled all over this production VM, which isn't unusual in these long-running, systems that are sort of out there. So we think our app lives here, but it actually has a bunch of stuff over here in Perl. And that's because when you install Perl modules, they operate a little bit like installing global modules with Node.js or something like that. It's actually installing stuff in the language installation, the global Perl environment here. So there's application code, application business logic tucked away inside the Perl that's running on this machine. There's also some configuration and stuff over here, right? We've been referencing the environments, production environments, web server configuration. So we know how do we include stuff and what the structure and things look like there. But that means that there's a little bit of application specific bits over here in our web server. And it's actually probably not uncommon that maybe there's some stuff tucked away in the database, right? I know that we haven't seen anything related to stored procedures or anything like that on this app, but it wouldn't be unusual to have business logic tucked away in those stored procs, or maybe configuration that's loaded from the database. So unfortunately, we've got all of these places that we might, find pieces of our application.
Yeah, and this Matt is definitely something we see even with our clients that we work with. So this is not an uncommon thing with these older applications. We're deploying this VM as a whole for this application. And as the application is being developed over a 15-year time span, decisions are going to be made, maybe that augment the architecture in a way that wasn't really originally intended. So that's some of the technical debt that we're looking at right now.
But for right this second, though, we're like really just interested in the bare minimum that we might be able to get this thing up and running, right? So maybe we can just use our vendoring trick. Maybe we can just grab the application bits, the application modules that are buried over here, and stick them in our libcf Linux FS3, and stuff will work. It's worth a try, but the first thing I notice as I'm moving stuff around here is that it looks like the Perl on our production environment is different than the one that's going to come with this current stem cell, the stack that I'm looking at in this build pack. So the thing that we're going to deploy to in the cloud is going to have this Perl 5.26, but our production environment has a slightly newer version of Perl, actually, 5.33. And I have no idea if this is going to bite us. That seems weird to me, but maybe. Why don't we just go ahead and give it a shot? So we'll push it, and it will crash. And we can take a look at the logs and verify that we can indeed not mix and match our Perl versions. That's not going to fly for us.
Yeah, so this is an interesting place we've sort of found ourselves. So we're trying to really stretch what the PHP build pack was meant to be used for, right? And as you said earlier, right? We didn't find Perl. Well, we didn't find Perl because it was designed for PHP, right? And so it might be time. Maybe we need to ask ourselves another question, which is, can I build my own environment and then deploy it with something like the binary build pack? And that might be a nice way for us to continue to use a standard build pack, but be slightly less opinionated.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, all of these are decision points and trade-offs, right? We could keep going down that rabbit hole, keep trying to do some interesting stuff, or maybe we rebuild things with a more similar Perl version or something. But at this point, I think it's worth moving up a layer, and instead of pushing this install directory, instead of pushing this with our PHP build pack, we're going to come and we're going to push all of this. We're going to push our environment and our installation together with our binary build pack. So do you want to take it away, Brandon?
Sure. Okay. So at this point, we're going to need to make some changes to our manifest. We're now no longer using the PHP build pack. So let's actually make that change. We'll use the binary build pack. But in the binary build pack, just from our experience working with it, we know it requires an explicit start command. We need to tell the binary build pack, since it's not as opinionated, how to start this application, right? So let's update that as well to tell it how to actually get started. Cool. And let's do our usual thing. Let's still push it. And I think at some point we should have had a count to say how many times we failed the CF push, but we did not succeed on this push. But we learned,
right? Like we're
learning.
Fast feedback loops. Like this is, maybe not the fastest feedback loop. As our app gets bigger and bigger, we might be pushing, a minute or a couple minutes. But like it's very easy for us to get the smallest change that maybe failed, but maybe change something, right? So let's take a look at the logs and see if we're moving forward.
I think that's really important. And so we're learning as we go. And in this case, okay, so something really interesting here. I'm seeing something that looks like a path in our production VM. I see /home/spring1. And we haven't seen anything like this before. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it means the structure of our VM is sort of leaking into the code base somewhere, maybe?
Somewhere. So let's just do a search everywhere. And just looking at this, it looks like, Matt, we have 14,000 instances of Home Spring 1. So when we must have gone through some installation process of this application when we were designing it and building it on our production VM, we must have been hard coding things. The cynic in me wants to simply do a find and replace. And
Sure.
We've all
What could go
probably
wrong?
been there where we think, all right, let's just find and replace. What could go wrong? Let's do it. Let's see what happens. And it fails.
Of
Let's go
course.
see
There's
why.
no way that was going to work.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But the interesting thing here is we are moving forward. So now rather than looking at failing on finding based off of a hard-coded path, it looks like we're just not able to load libperl. We're not able to find a shared object, which is great. Means we've learned something new. Let's revisit. Let's go back to figure out where libperl lives in our production VM.
Yeah. In case anybody out there is a Perl expert and you can't tell, Brandon and I are not Perl experts, right? So the idea here of inheriting a tech stack and exploring a tech stack and migrating an application that you don't necessarily have all the answers for is totally doable. This process we're working through is sort of the kind of thing that you sort of iteratively explore and fail and fail and fail and fail, and eventually you get it. So I'm looking around. We can take a quick look in the stuff that we're pushing because we're practically pushing everything at this point. Or I can take a look at the production VM. And I do find that libperl over here in the Perl installation in our environment. So it is there. It is something that we're pushing with our app. So I'm curious why we're not seeing it at this point. And this might be a great opportunity to switch from a hard-coded command in our manifests that we are triggering with the binary build pack. Let's get it to call a startup script instead. And that, like, we're just going to take that command and stick it right in the startup script, but it's also going to give us a chance to sort of expand and get more visibility into what's going on. So you can see we've explicitly set the path to our Perl and our Apache, because right now the only thing I can think of is that maybe there's something running that's using the Perl that came with the build pack or the stem cell, and it's not using our vendored environment Perl. And so it's not seeing that libperl that we wanted. I don't know though. So we're just gonna make sure that everything that calls Perl is in fact calling our vendored Perl. We're just double checking that with the which Perl here. And we're just gonna start Apache just like we were before and see if we can sort of understand better what's happening. We're just update the manifest real quick to call our startup script. And we're going to push it, and it fails. And truthfully, I expected this one to fail because we didn't really change a whole heck of a lot. We're just really trying to learn something new here. If we take a look at the logs, we can see that it is updating our path. And when we do that which Perl, it is in fact calling the Perl that we think it should be. But we are still missing this shared object, this libperl library. So yeah, at this point, we Googled it. Right, we got to read through 15-year-old forum posts to understand what exactly is happening. And the best we can understand here that, because we built the Apache and we built the Perl and we built the mod Perl all on that, for that virtual machine, on that virtual machine, that there might still be places that Apache was built to look for that libperl. And even though it's all sort of in the same shape, it's still in a different directory, right? We just had to do that massive find and replace. So we could keep picking at this. Maybe there's somebody out in the audience that's like obviously knows, man, if you would have just set this magic environment variable and done this and that, you would have gotten through. But I think this brings us to another interesting sort of maneuver when we're doing these kind of replatforming or migration.
Yeah, so at this point, Matt and I decided to rebuild our application and do it in a way that matches the final deployment structure. So let me explain what that means. So we know the app wants to ultimately live. We're targeting an environment that has a well-defined structure of home app, VCAP app. So we know that that's the target deployment.
That the build pack is going to make for us, right, Brandon? So the build pack gives us an opinionated target. We know it's going to be in this shape. Can we make the application less surprised by that shape.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. So what we did was we went through and we rebuilt our application to reflect this change. And ultimately, our hope was that by doing this, we fixed the problem we just saw with the hard-coded paths. We did the find and replace on and all of that. But we also resolved some of these other issues we saw after doing the find and replace that were the root problem we were actually seeing. So we went off, we built the production environment. We're not going to show you what that looks like here, but it did take some time. And after that, we pushed, and with the latest manifest, we left everything else the same that we have showed you up to this point, and we failed. And we took a look at the logs, and it looks
better,
a little bit better, right? And so now it looks like we're missing a shared library. So it's almost like do we go back to the vendoring trick we did earlier? Or do we go down a different path? And what we decided that at this point was, we'll create a multi-build pack manifest ourselves. It's one shared library we're trying to pull in and bring in. So what we did was we updated our manifest to include the app build pack directly into that. And if we then go update our app YAML file with the shared object we're looking for, in this case, which is this lib MySQL client dev package, we'll pull that in and we'll CF push and we'll see what happens. And at this point, we're sad. We're sad, but let's go take a look at the logs and let's see what happened. So what's great about this at this point, what's great is we're continually making progress. We're running a small experiment. We're using CF push to be our excitement into that experiment to give us fast feedback, as Matt mentioned earlier. And what I love about this error is that we're no longer looking at things related to objects not being available, Perl modules not being available. Actually, it looks like we just can't connect to database. So we're starting to get to, it's looking for, it's trying to connect. We're not able to connect. So let's dig deeper. Let's see what's going on here, Matt.
Yeah, perfect. So we know that the production environment talked to its local database on that local socket. And this application running in the cloud has no local database. It has no socket. There's nothing to talk to. So this brings us to like our last sort of big question around exploring how to migrate something with a build pack. It's like, how does this application talk to its external dependencies, like a database? And that might mean things like your production environment has a very specific network pipe to its production databases. And so when you push to a new environment like the cloud, you might not have that connectivity. It might mean things like this, where it's like, hey, we're very specifically talking through these local sockets. It might be something like finding a shared, named resource like a JNDI connection inside your big shared web container, your web application server. So those are the kinds of things that we sort of start to look at when we're seeing that the app is running, but it's not connecting to stuff. This is a great place to be. And what we know here with our application is that it bakes this custom password Perl module that sort of bakes our credentials into this virtual one user. And this is awesome. And frankly, like when I find code that has connection stuff like this is a great find, because it basically means that I can eventually come in here and rewire how I get the values for host or username or password or whatever. And the application is none the wiser, right? It's happily thinking it's talking to this virtual one user. It has no idea where it's getting it. So eventually I want to refactor this to maybe pull from my environment or from a config map in Kubernetes or something. But right this second, I want to do the simplest possible thing. So we're just going to really quickly create an app or a MySQL server that we can use. And the reason we want to do that, we can bind our application to it. And that's going to cause us to get a set of credentials generated for this application, between this application and the database. I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab those credentials manually. And you can do that through CFM or the apps manager there. But I just went in, I grabbed them. I'm going to come back to my password module, and I'm going to hand jam those guys in. And yes, eventually I want to refactor this to be smart and load things from its environment variables and stuff. But again, we want the smallest possible test, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to push it. and it fails, which is really a bummer. I was almost positive that that was going to work. And if we take a look at the logs real quick, it looks like actually that's way better. It's connecting now. It's just not finding the schema that it's expecting. It's not finding tables that it assumes already exists.
And at this point, Matt and I are pretty happy.
Mhm.
We've been working through some really interesting challenges, and now we kind of revisited how we initially created our production VM in the first place, and there was this additional step which was to actually go through the process of installing the schema. So go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think like we're just going to give it a shot. It's like it's installation administrative task. So we just plug our credentials into that thing and hope that we can just run it. It's going to create the tables for us. We'll figure out how to pipeline it and do stuff later. We just want to get this app up and running. And when we run this setup script, we find that it fails. And it fails because our MySQL instance in the cloud is way more strict than what is currently configured in our production environment. So a bunch of these queries to create tables and set up the schema actually fail because they're just not valid.
At this point, we had to ask ourselves the question of how can we remedy this? So as Matt mentioned, he spun up an instance of MySQL in the Cloud Foundry environment we were using. The reason for that was to just do it quickly and cheaply. We could have, the simplest step would have been for us to point directly to our production VM. But we decided, so we decided to go that first route. We have it's very strict. So option 2 could be we could point back to the local, to our production VM on our with our existing app. A third option would be to spin up a MySQL in the cloud, and we would just need to have the permissions to change it to a less strict mode. And finally, we could refactor the app, which I think Matt will shake his head.
You can't see me shaking my head angrily.
So Matt's over there shaking his head. This is what we want to avoid, as he mentioned earlier with the password change. We're looking for smallest changes necessary to get this up least risky. If we're starting to refactor the app to be able to work in the environment we're in, we're potentially adding risk to this operation. So we went option 1. We determined that we couldn't find an easy way for us to actually change the strictness on that provisioned MySQL. It's managed by the service broker. We decided let's go to the next option. Option 2 was promising, except for this demo, we didn't have access between where our production VM ran and where our app is actually hosted in Cloud Foundry. That's not uncommon either at clients. So we actually ended up with option 3. We spun up a database in the public cloud. We set our strict to a less strict mode, our mode to a less strict mode, and we went that way and reran. So we'll give it one more push.
Push it.
We'll see. Oh,
yes.
And hopefully, Matt put his hands up. I'll put my hands up because you can't see Matt.
Yeah.
But at this point, we were very happy. So we just spent 5 calendar days, not necessarily 5 working days, re-platforming this application. We were not Perl experts. We obviously have Cloud Foundry expertise, Buildpack expertise, troubleshooting expertise. But one thing that's really important here is as you walked with us on this journey through our re-platforming journal, you should have seen, hopefully, that a lot of this work we were doing wasn't necessarily specific to Perl. We were taking small incremental steps to try and solve a problem that we were facing in that point in time. We were trying to introduce small feedback loops so we could keep the ball rolling, and we were experimenting very cheaply. And that's one of the reasons we decided to go down the path of using Cloud Foundry for this, just to give us something to kick the tires every time we asked ourselves a new question.
Yeah, I think that sort of brings us to the end of the scenario. And I think we just want to talk for a couple minutes here as we wrap up on when would you do these shenanigans that we just went through, right? Like I don't think I would ever recommend everybody go off and push their Perl apps with a PHP build pack every time, or almost any time maybe, who knows? I have to apologize if the PHP Buildpack developers are out there and they're just, I'm sorry for what we did. But the idea here, the tool that you have in your tool belt with Buildpacks is really fascinating because it gives you a really clear target to experiment with, like Brandon's saying. So if we had, like, I'm building whatever I want, I just sort of exploring with Docker files, or I can, maybe I'm hand building another image or doing something, like the constraints of the build pack gave us the shape that the app needed to be in and let us continually like hone the edges off of it, right? To sort of get it to the point where it was going to run well in this environment. And really what we find is that, we aren't all at the beginning of this app modernization journey. Everybody at Spring One has been doing something like this for a long time, right? Maybe they've tackled the easy wins. They've already done the stuff that, hey, we can, move these to the cloud. We can, write some new microservices. It's awesome. We all have this sense of which applications in our portfolio are really big business value things. It's like the crown jewels, right? We know what we're going to sort of do and invest in those. Maybe we've done the obvious rewrites, the apps that are clearly valuable enough that they're going to pay back the clearly high investment when we start to rewrite them. But we're sitting in front of all these apps that don't have an obvious answer. Things like your back office support applications that have internal users but not external ones, or the apps that are non-trivial apps. Like, it's going to cost a lot to rewrite those. We don't have the developers anymore, or we don't have the skill sets to really deeply understand how complex they are. So I'm not really sure how far I can go with them. Or maybe they're inherited heritage apps, things that have been around in your application portfolio for a long time, and you have new teams rotating in and taking over them, and they just don't have the history or the experience with the tech stack. And I think Buildpacks are a fascinating way to frame and work through this iterative replatforming journey to get some of these benefits. Brandon, do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of benefits we see?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, where this is all coming from, Matt and I spend a lot of time working on app modernization journeys with clients. And these are the things we see. A lot of times we'll see they know how to move to the cloud. They know how to move, these easy wins to the cloud to get further funding so that they can start to focus on maybe these more monolithic applications that they need to put developer investment behind to build microservices. And where we end up with are a collection of applications that are having a hard time finding a home because they, as Matt said, it's very challenging to maybe the people have left that originally wrote them. And so it's been this rotating inheritance of, I'm now managing this app, but I don't want to touch too much because I don't want to break anything. So it's really these apps, they provide value to the business, but they're very hard to change. And maybe the expertise isn't there. Maybe you don't have any Perl developers anymore. You've moved to a different language, your dev shops, you're a different dev shop. So really what we're looking at for these applications is we're trying to gain operational benefits. So you've invested in a lot of our customers on their app modernization journeys have invested in platform as a service. They've invested in the cloud. They've invested in tooling. They've built up pipelines. They have governance and process around all of this new technology. How do we get this app onto that? How do we get this app onboarded onto that and gain operational benefits that we've built out? As I said earlier, Matt and I spent about 5 days replatforming this application part-time, and it's much cheaper to put 2 people on a part-time replatform to get those operational benefits than to commit to a full rewrite and dig through all of that technical debt to try and to rebuild this thing. What we're trying to do here is be able to continue our journey. So we think about modernization as a journey. It's a spectrum. It's not you're done. You're never really fully done. And I think a lot of you can attest to that. So in this case, what we're doing is by replatforming, we're buying ourselves more time to make a decision later about this application. Do we retire and rewrite? Do we just retire it and the capabilities are covered by other applications? So this is a way for us to buy more time into making that decision. And finally, the last thing here I'll note is it gives the developer team quick way to gain fast insights. Matt and I, we took a code base we didn't know anything about. By doing this replatforming exercise, we know a lot more about how this application operates than we would have had we not gone through this exercise. So maybe you find yourself, maybe you're that developer that finds yourself inheriting a legacy application, you know nothing about it. Rather than going through each line of source code line by line by line, take an approach of replatforming it to the cloud. You'll learn a lot about how that app actually operates. So use it as a quick start guide.
Yeah. I think that brings us to the end. I hope if you take away something here, you take away those handful of questions and decision points we asked as we went through things, and how useful the constraints and the iteration that you get from Buildpacks will give you in like providing sort of a roadmap on how you migrate something like this. Come join us on the Q&A. We'd love to chat a little bit more with you. You can jump into the Slack and chat there. I think there's a link in the Slack now. So we hope to see you in a couple minutes.
Thanks, everybody.
Brandon, Matt, thanks so much for that very warm and fuzzy performance of containerizing a Perl application on an Apache server. It just makes me feel so nostalgic to see some people run through this surprising task of something that I've personally done before as well. So I brought some other things that make me feel nostalgic. This piece of Lego, the first ever kind of containerized thing I've ever played with. The laptop I learned to write Perl on, and also this family heirloom. Appreciate you so much, and cheers.